Hey everyone, so we're diving into a really interesting corner of Philippine law today. It's about a very specific and honestly pretty misunderstood exception when it comes to divorce. This thing affects thousands of couples with mixed nationalities, and it creates this fascinating legal puzzle.
It all boils down to this one question, right? Can a Filipino citizen actually get a divorce? You'd think the answer would be a simple yes or no, but nope. The answer is a classic, it's complicated. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
Okay, so first things first, let's get the baseline straight. The Philippines, outside of Vatican City, is the only country in the world without a general divorce law. So the general rule is incredibly firm. For Filipinos married to other Filipinos, absolute divorce is just not on the table. You have to keep this in mind as we go forward, because this is the foundation for everything.
And that very firm rule? Well, it leads us straight into a really strange and, for a very long time, a deeply unfair situation that can happen in mixed nationality marriages. It's what I call the marriage paradox.
So before the family code was updated, you had this incredibly lopsided scenario. Picture this, a Filipino marries a foreigner. The foreign spouse goes back to their home country, gets a divorce, and just like that, they're free to move on, to remarry. But the Filipino spouse, they were completely stuck. Under Philippine law, they were still considered married. It was like a one-way legal door. One person walks right through to freedom, while the other is left locked inside.
So you have to ask why. Why did this totally bizarre situation even exist? Well, the answer is buried in a core concept of Philippine civil law, something called the nationality principle.
The nationality principle basically says that a Filipino citizen carries Philippine family law with them like a backpack, wherever they go in the world. So it doesn't matter if you're living in Manila or Madrid. If you're a Filipino, your marital status is governed by Philippine law. And since Philippine law didn't recognize divorce, well, you see the problem. You couldn't be divorced in the eyes of your own country.
And look, this wasn't just some dusty legal theory. This was a real problem for real people. The landmark case Van Dorn versus Ramillo Jr. put this issue right in front of the Supreme Court. The court itself had to acknowledge how absurd it was that a Filipino could be legally single in their spouse's country, but still very much married back home. This case really put a spotlight on a legal conflict that was screaming for a fix.
Thankfully, the legislature recognized this injustice. So when the Family Code of the Philippines came along, it introduced a very specific, very targeted solution to deal with this one-sided mess.
Now, this fix wasn't about secretly introducing divorce for everyone. No, it was about leveling the playing field for those specific Filipinos who were caught in this international legal trap. It was a surgical solution for a very particular problem.
And here it is, the second paragraph of Article 26 of the Family Code. This paragraph right here is the key that unlocks that legal bind. It says that if a foreigner divorces their Filipino spouse abroad, and that divorce means the foreigner can legally remarry, then, and this is the big part, the Filipino spouse is also free to remarry under Philippine law.
But, and believe me, this is a huge but, this article isn't some magic wand. It doesn't just apply automatically. For it to work, a very specific checklist of conditions, what lawyers call sine qua non, basically the absolute must-haves, have to be met.
So this whole remedy depends on 4 things, and you have to prove every single one of them in court. 1, there has to be a valid marriage between a Filipino and a foreigner. 2, a valid divorce has to be obtained in another country. 3, and you really got to pay attention to this one, the divorce has to be obtained by the foreign spouse. And 4, that same divorce has to legally allow that foreigner to remarry. If you miss even one of these, the whole thing is a no-go.
Yeah, that third condition is almost always the sticking point. It's where most of the confusion comes from, and it is absolutely critical. The law is so specific about who has to be the one to go out and get that divorce.
So here's the deal. If the foreign spouse starts the divorce proceedings, then Article 26 might be the path forward for the Filipino spouse. But, and this is the part that trips people up, if the Filipino spouse goes abroad and files for divorce themselves, that nationality principle kicks right back in. They're still bound by Filipino law, which means that divorce won't be recognized for them. They'd still be legally married with no right to remarry.
Understanding that difference is everything. It's the key to getting what Article 26 is all about. It's not some backdoor to divorce, you know? It's a very specific key for a very specific lock.
So what's the bottom line here? Look, this is not a secret divorce law for everybody. It's a very carefully written fix for a very specific injustice. It's a law acknowledging that, hey, international marriages are complicated. And more than anything, it makes sure a Filipino citizen isn't forced to stay married to someone who, in the eyes of the rest of the world, is already their ex.
And that kind of leaves us with a final question to chew on. Even though this article is a really narrow exception, does it maybe signal a slow shift? You know, a change in how the Philippine legal system thinks about marriage and divorce. Is this a tiny crack in the wall, or is it just a neat little patch designed to fix one single problem? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.